Every villain thinks they are the hero of their own story. That is the line people say when they want to sound smart about fiction. But here is the thing. Sometimes they are not just the hero of their own story. Sometimes they are actually right. Not about the murder, not about the revenge schemes or the world domination or the specific choice to build a robot and drop it on a city, but about the thing underneath all of that, the grievance, the point. The moment where, if you are being completely honest, you have to admit that they had a case. Today we are looking at the villains who were right, not defending what they did, just acknowledging what they got correct. Because sometimes the scariest thing about a villain is not how wrong they are, it is how right they are about one specific thing that nobody else was willing to say out loud. Let us start with the most disrespected boyfriend in animated film history. Ken from B-Movie does not get enough credit. Yes, he is dramatic. Yes, his reaction to finding a bee sitting in his chair, clinking glasses with his girlfriend, was perhaps a few notches above what the situation required. But let us actually look at what Ken was dealing with before we write him off completely. Vanessa met Barry the bee, a literal bee, and within what appears to be a very short window of time, she canceled yogurt night with her actual human boyfriend to become Barry's legal counsel in a lawsuit against the entire human race. Ken comes home to find this bee sitting in his chair like he owns the place, laughing and clinking glasses with the woman Ken is in a relationship with. And when Ken expresses any kind of concern about this arrangement, Vanessa defends the bee. Ken was not wrong. He was dealing with a genuine romantic crisis, and nobody in that film took it seriously because the audience was too busy rooting for the bee. But strip away the animation and the premise, and what you have is a man whose girlfriend completely checked out of their relationship for a new connection she met recently, dismissed his concerns entirely, and chose the new person's side in every disagreement. Ken had issues, but Ken also had a point. Vincent from Over the Hedge just wanted to sleep. That was the entire situation. A bear in hibernation with a very reasonable do not disturb energy, a food supply he had been building all season, and zero interest in whatever RJ the raccoon had going on. Then RJ broke in, raided everything he had like he was restocking a warehouse, got it all destroyed, and then had the extraordinary nerve to still be there when Vincent woke up fully. Let us be honest, if someone broke into your home while you were asleep, took everything in your refrigerator, got it all destroyed, and was still standing in your kitchen when you came downstairs, you would not be calm about it either. Vincent's reaction was extreme. The wanting to eat RJ part was genuinely concerning, but the fundamental grievance was completely legitimate. He was wronged repeatedly by someone who never stopped to consider that other living things have possessions and boundaries, in a reasonable expectation of not being robbed during hibernation. Lotso from Toy Story 3 did terrible things, running Sunnyside like a prison, manipulating new arrivals, consigning toys he did not like to the toddler room as punishment. None of that is defensible, but in the middle of all of it, Lotso said something that is genuinely difficult to argue with. We are all just trash waiting to be thrown away. Dark, absolutely, but wrong?
Sheriff, if your kid loves you so much, why is he leaving?
Think about every toy you had as a child. Think about where those toys are now. In a box somewhere. Donated. Lost. Sitting in a landfill. The entire premise of the Toy Story franchise is built around toys being discarded when children grow up. Lotso experienced that abandonment firsthand, was replaced without a second thought, and came back to find his owner had simply moved on. His response to that pain was to turn an entire daycare into a dictatorship, which was clearly too far. But the observation underneath it was correct. Toys do get thrown away, every single one of them eventually. Lotso just said it out loud. Death from Puss in Boots. The last wish is supposed to be neutral, impartial, the force that clocks in, collects souls, and moves on without personal investment. That is the job description. But Puss in Boots spent his entire career treating mortality like a joke. 9 lives burned through with reckless abandon, laughing at death literally and publicly and repeatedly, mocking the concept of consequences while consequences piled up around him. When death finally showed up with personal energy, with actual irritation at this specific cat, the audience was supposed to find it frightening. And it was frightening, magnificently so. But it was also fair. You spent years disrespecting the fundamental reality that death represents, and then acted surprised when death took it personally. Puss had it coming, not the dying part necessarily, but the being hunted by an annoyed and highly competent wolf who happened to be the physical embodiment of mortality. That was earned. Yzma from the Emperor's New Groove gets filed under villain without much consideration for the context. She was plotting to poison Kuzco. She accidentally turned him into a llama while trying to assassinate him. These are not the actions of someone operating within normal professional boundaries. But here is what the film asks you to overlook. Yzma practically raised Kuzco. She was there through his entire development as a person and as a ruler. She ran the empire competently while he was too busy throwing people out of windows for disrupting his groove. And after all of that, he fired her. Publicly, casually, without a second thought. As if decades of service meant nothing the moment she was no longer convenient. And then look at what Kuzco actually was as an emperor. He announced plans to destroy an entire village to build a summer getaway and presented it like he was sharing exciting news. He gave the affected villagers no alternative, no compensation, no acknowledgement that their lives had any value beyond the inconvenience of their location. Yzma was right that Kuzco was not fit to lead. She just expressed that opinion in a way that involved poison, which was where she lost the moral high ground entirely. Syndrome from The Incredibles is one of the most genuinely compelling villains Pixar has ever produced. Not because of the Omnidroid or the rocket boots or the island lair, because underneath all of it, his central argument is one that is surprisingly difficult to dismiss. When everyone is super, no one will be. Syndrome was rejected by his idol as a child for the crime of being too enthusiastic, too ordinary, born without powers in a world that celebrated people who had them through no merit of their own.
Important lesson. You can't count on anyone, especially your heroes.
I was wrong to treat...
His response was to dedicate his entire life to building technology that could give everyone what the lucky ones were simply born with. That is not an evil idea. That is actually a fairly reasonable critique of a system that rewards genetic lottery winners while shutting out everyone else. The execution was the problem. You do not fix inequality by building a murder robot and dropping it on a city. You do not make your point about access by kidnapping a baby. Syndrome had a legitimate grievance and then buried it under a body count. But the grievance was real. And if he had channeled that same obsessive intelligence into literally anything else, he might have actually changed something. Callahan from Big Hero 6 is the villain the film earns most honestly, because before he was yokai, before the mask and the microbots and the revenge plot, he was just a father. A professor who loved his students and lost his daughter to a man who valued innovation over safety. Cray knew the portal was not ready. The machine said so directly. He pushed forward anyway because the project mattered more to him than the risk. And Abigail disappeared into an unstable portal because of that decision. Callahan watched corporate ambition swallow his daughter whole and received no accountability, no justice, no acknowledgement that what happened was preventable. His response crossed every line. Threatening an entire city to get to one man is not justice, but the rage underneath it was completely understandable. When Hero tells him destroying Cry will not change anything, Callahan pauses. And in that pause, you see it. Not a monster. A father who never processed his grief and ran out of any other way to hold it. He needed help long before he needed a mask. What Cry did to his daughter was wrong. What Callahan did with that wrong was worse. But the original wound was real. Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda might be the most legitimately wrong villain on this entire list. Not because his rampage was justified. It was not. But because what was done to him before the rampage was genuinely cruel in a way the film does not fully acknowledge. Shifu raised Tai Lung as a son, trained him from childhood, told him daily that he was destined for greatness, that the Dragon Scroll was his, that everything he was working toward was waiting for him at the end of all that training. Tai Lung did not decide he deserved the Dragon Scroll on his own. He was taught to believe it by the person who raised him. And then, when Oogway said no, Shifu folded immediately, did not fight for him, did not defend him. Just stepped aside and let the dream he had built in this child's mind get taken away without a word of explanation. Tai Lung's breakdown in that moment was not the reaction of a villain. It was the reaction of someone who had their entire identity pulled out from under them by the people who put it there in the first place. The rage that followed was destructive and inexcusable, but the source of it was a real betrayal by someone who should have known better. That is the thread connecting every villain on this list. Ken's romantic crisis, Vincent's stolen food supply, Lotso's abandonment, Death's disrespect, Yzma's dismissal, Syndrome's rejection, Callahan's grief, Tai Lung's broken promise. None of them started as monsters. Every single one of them had something real happen to them first, something unfair or painful or genuinely wrong, and then they made a choice about what to do with it. That is what separates a compelling villain from a forgettable one. Not the powers or the plan or the aesthetic, the legitimate grievance underneath it all, the thing that makes you pause for just a second before you root against them. Because the best villains do not just threaten the hero, they hold up a mirror to something real, something uncomfortable, something the story would rather not say out loud. They were wrong about what they did, but they were not always wrong about why.